The parting of the sea. The night god split the ocean in two. A child was screaming somewhere in the crowd. Not crying. Screaming, the kind of sound a child makes when they understand, for the first time, that the adults around them do not have a plan. That no one is going to fix this. That the thing coming behind them is real. The Red Sea stretched before them, black and enormous under the night sky, its waves indifferent, its horizon swallowing all hope of escape. And behind them, growing louder with every heartbeat, the thunder of 600 iron chariots. Pharaoh had changed his mind. They had left Egypt in darkness 3 weeks ago. 600,000 people, not an army, not a nation yet, just a mass of exhausted human beings who had spent 400 years being told they were nothing. They carried whatever they could. Bread that hadn't risen. Children on their shoulders. The bones of a man named Joseph, who had made them promise, centuries before, that they would not leave him behind. They believed they were free. They were wrong. The dust cloud appeared on the horizon at midday. Someone with sharp eyes saw it first and said nothing for a long moment, hoping they were mistaken. They were not. By the time the sun began to set, you could hear the wheels. By the time it was fully dark, you could feel them, a vibration in the earth itself, the ground trembling slightly beneath 600,000 pairs of feet that had suddenly stopped moving. They stood at the edge of the sea with nowhere to go. Was there not enough room to bury us in Egypt? A man shouted, and the cruelty of the question was that it was not cowardice. It was exhaustion. It was 400 years of having every hope crushed so thoroughly that hope itself had begun to feel like the enemy. Why did you bring us out here to die in the desert? The screaming child had gone quiet now. That was somehow worse. Moses walked to the water's edge. He did not look like a man with a plan. He did not look like a hero. He was an old man with a staff, standing at the edge of an ocean, and the army of the most powerful empire on earth was less than an hour behind him. He prayed. Not the prayer of a man who is confident. The prayer of a man who has nothing left, no strategy, no escape route, no backup, and has handed everything, completely, to the only thing greater than the situation. The words came from somewhere below language, below thought. You brought us here. You must take us through. And then the answer came. Not as a voice. As a certainty. Raise your staff. Stretch your hand over the sea. Moses turned to face the water. He raised his staff. The wind came first. It hit the surface of the Red Sea like a wall, not a storm wind, not a natural wind, but something with intention behind it, something that knew exactly what it was doing. The waves flattened. The surface of the water began to pull back from the center as if the sea itself was recoiling from something it had been commanded to fear. Then the sound. It began as a low groan, the sound of something enormous being asked to do something it had never done before. Then it became a roar. Then it became a crack, like the earth splitting, like the sky breaking, and the water on the right side began to rise, not splash, not wave, but rise, lifting itself upward in a vertical wall, dark green, and shot through with silver light, and inside it you could see everything the sea contained, fish suspended mid-swim, the shapes of creatures no man had ever seen, the wreckage of old ships from older wars, all of it frozen, all of it held in place by something that had no name in any human language. The wall on the left rose the same way. And between them, dry ground. Not wet sand. Not mud. Dry ground. Hard packed, solid, as if it had been waiting beneath the water for exactly this night. The crowd did not move for a long moment. Then Moses stepped forward, not triumphantly, not dramatically, but the way a man steps forward when he knows the instruction came from somewhere above him and his only job is to obey, and 600,000 people followed him into the corridor between two walls of sea. They walked in near silence. The walls of water rose on either side of them 40, 50, 60 feet into the air, trembling, roaring softly, held back by something invisible and absolute. Salt water dripped from the edges. A woman reached out and touched the wall beside her and pulled her hand back quickly, wet and cold. Her daughter asked her what it felt like. Like a door, she said. Like something opened a door. An old man near the back of the crowd walked slowly, his knees failing, supported by two younger men who had been strangers to him 3 weeks ago. He looked up at the wall of water to his right. A whale hung inside it, enormous, still, its dark eye the size of a cartwheel, looking at nothing or looking at everything. He had been a slave for 60 years. He had never seen anything that did not belong to someone who wanted to use it. He looked at the whale for a long time. Then he kept walking. On the far shore, Pharaoh reached the water's edge. He saw the path. He saw the walls of water standing like pillars, trembling but holding. He saw the distant figures of his property walking away from him through the impossible corridor, small in the dark. One of his generals pulled his horse alongside the royal chariot and said nothing for a moment. He was a man who had seen the plagues. He had watched the Nile run red. He had buried his firstborn son. He had watched Pharaoh harden his heart, again and again, against every sign that was placed in front of him. "My lord," he said quietly. "This is not a road." Pharaoh looked at the path between the walls of water. At the dry ground, at the retreating backs of 600,000 people he had decided were his. He raised his hand. The army moved forward. The chariots entered the seabed. For the first 100 yards it went well. The ground was firm, the walls held, the horses moved fast. Then the wheels began to sink. Not dramatically, not all at once, but gradually, the way certainty drains from a man who has made a terrible mistake and only now realizes it. The wheels sank into the ground that had seemed dry and solid and turned out to be neither. Horses stumbled. Chariots listed to one side. The general's horse stopped. The horse refused to move forward. It pulled back against the reins, nostrils wide, eyes wild, its whole body shaking with a fear so specific and so absolute that the general felt it pass through the reins into his own hands. Animals knew things. He had always known that. He had never wanted to believe it until now. "Turn back!" Someone shouted from behind him. "Turn back!" Others took up the cry. The chariots ahead of them were tangled now, wheels locked, horses rearing, men shouting over each other in the dark. The walls of water were trembling more violently than before, a deep grinding sound running through them like something about to give way. The general turned his horse. He had gone perhaps 20 yards back toward the Egyptian shore when the sound changed. It was not a collapse. It was not a crack. It was a release, the sound of something enormous that had been held in place by sheer divine will suddenly being let go all at once. Both walls fell simultaneously, inward, toward each other, and the Red Sea closed over the army of Egypt the way night closes over a fire, completely, instantly, without negotiation. The sound lasted perhaps 4 seconds. Then silence. The sea was calm. Its surface flat and black and ordinary under the stars, as if nothing had ever disturbed it. As if no army had ever entered it. As if 600 iron chariots had never existed. The waves moved gently toward the far shore and left wet sand at the feet of 600,000 people who stood there and could not speak. Moses sat apart from them. He sat on a rock at the water's edge and looked at the sea that had, an hour ago, been the most impossible obstacle in the world and was now simply the sea again. His hands were shaking slightly. Not from fear. From something he had no name for, the particular trembling that comes when you have been chosen as the instrument of something so much larger than yourself that the experience leaves marks on the body. He had not parted the sea. He needed them to understand that. He had raised a staff because he was told to. The rest had nothing to do with him. Somewhere behind him, a drum began to play. A woman's voice began to sing, not words at first, just sound, just the sound of a human being alive when they expected to be dead. Other voices joined. Then hands. Then feet. Moses listened to it without turning around. He was thinking about the dry ground that had been waiting beneath the sea, patient, prepared, already there before anyone had asked for it. As if the path had been laid before the people had been born. Before the slavery. Before the 400 years of suffering that had seemed, from inside it, like meaningless cruelty. As if the whole thing had always been going somewhere. He looked at the calm water. Then he stood up and walked back to his people. 600,000 slaves crossed the Red Sea on dry ground and never saw Egypt again. The path had been there all along, waiting beneath the water, prepared before they needed it. The question was never whether God would open a way. The question was whether they were willing to take the first step,